I'm Bishop John Anderson from the Southwestern Minnesota Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and although all of us are standing here together today for our youth experiencing or at risk of homelessness, with the countless individuals, organizations, and others behind further investment in the Homeless Youth Act. I come from Belgrade, Minnesota, 23 miles north of Willmar. I live in New Ulm, Minnesota, 90 miles southeast of Willmar. And in Willmar, a city in our synod, young people have sought shelter under bridges and slept under bridges. They have engaged in couch hopping from place to place because they're homeless. They have lived with families in violation of those families' leases, or they have had to sleep in unsafe conditions. So homelessness is not only an experience in the metro area, it's also an experience in rural Minnesota. So the Department of Human Services released a report this week on the reach of the Homeless Youth Act and the investments of the last 2 years. 42% of homeless youth in Minnesota identified by Wilder Research are out in outstate Minnesota. And because of the Homeless Youth Act, 40% of the Homeless Youth Act funds are being used to serve youth in greater Minnesota in areas that lacked any substantial service before. So on any particular night, there are 14,000 human beings in Minnesota who are homeless, and over half of those homeless people are youth. They're under the age of 21. And in Minnesota, 1 in 8 households pay half or more of their income towards housing. And when housing costs are that high and consume that much of a household's income, people often struggle to stay ahead of all of their other basic needs. And sometimes youth are the ones who can no longer stay at home. So we call for an additional increase of $4 million that will support youth to transition to successful adulthoods, helping them avoid long-term homelessness and achieving success in their life in all ways, in their work life, in their communal life, because no young person should have to sleep underneath a bridge anywhere in our state. I'm pleased to introduce the chief author in the House of Representatives for this bill, Representative Anna Wills from Apple Valley. Anna.
Thank you all for being here today, and I really am proud to be authoring the Homeless Youth Act for this session and advocating for the $4 million increase. And there's also a provision in the bill that addresses the age gap that we have, increasing the age of the definition of homeless youth up through 21 to up through 24, which conforms with the federal definition. And this is just an effort to streamline the paperwork and make sure that these individuals are getting the supports that they need. And I wanted to offer just a few thoughts about how this bill supports students in our state, especially since 13,000 public school students have been identified as homeless over the last 2 years. And as I think about students having to face the difficulties of homelessness and how that affects their education and therefore can affect their path to success in the future. Just a couple of comments. When they're feeling the instability of homelessness, there could be missed assignments, and they have lack of transportation and difficulty accumulating credits. There's irregular school attendance, and it really sets them off on the wrong path if they're struggling with homelessness. So that's one aspect that we're looking at in trying to ensure that these children and youth are supported and that we're able to get them on a stable path towards success in the future. And just one statistic that I found fascinating was that for every youth that fails to graduate, which often is the outcome of a homeless youth, it could potentially cost the community about $750,000 in lost tax revenues, healthcare costs, potentially incarceration, and social services. So as I'm looking at the struggles that these individuals are facing and the services that are out there to to help them get on the right path. I'm encouraged that we do have the Homeless Youth Act and proposal here today to increase the funding by $4 million. There were about $20 million in requests received by DHS to access the funding, and we've had about $6 million in our budget for the last 2 years. And DHS estimated that about 10 million of those requests are actually viable requests and would be able to get services where they're most needed. So that's the reasoning behind that $4 million increase up to 10 million. A couple of things that I think we need to keep in mind as we're thinking about these homeless youth. A lot of them are in very difficult situations and facing issues such as sexual abuse and neglect. I have a few numbers here for you. 42% have experienced physical abuse, 34% have experienced parental neglect, 27% have experienced sexual abuse. And a lot of times these youth are coming into this situation because they're either running away from the abuse or they are aging out of the foster care system and have nowhere else to go. And a lot of times it's situations with inadequate housing for the family. So there's a lot of issues that are compounding the situation for these youth. And what I'm encouraged about is that the goal of these funds is to get these youth the support that they need and help them with skills, life skills, to get them on a path towards success. So I'm proud to support the legislation. I know that it will save money in the long run, and it will also save heartache in the long run for these individuals. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. I'm State Senator Scott Dibble, and I represent a part of Minneapolis, and I'm very honored to be standing alongside Representative Wills as the House author of this bill. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who is here today to stand in support with these young people. This has been a movement we've built over many, many years now, and to be at this moment, at this threshold, to really punch through and raise the resources necessary so that Minnesota can do well by its young people. We can and we must do better. We've shown the efficacy and utility of these services, this wide range of services. It has a real positive outcome and effect in young people's lives. And what's been most inspiring, of course, and we'll hear from a young person next, is how young people have claimed their own power despite the long odds that they've faced, and that's what a part of this movement represents. But the adults and the agencies who love these young people, who take them in and set them on a path for successful adulthood, is extremely inspiring and really speaks to the best of Minnesota and Minnesotans. Young people are homeless or at risk because they have run from abuse in their own homes. They've come out to their parents and they've been rejected. Their parents' mental illness or chemical dependency, or their own mental illness and symptoms interfere with their ability to live at home. Or maybe there's inadequate housing where their family is staying, or they may be too old to stay in the shelter or be on the lease in some setting where their family is living. Or they've aged out of foster care and they have no support, hence the effort to increase the age eligibility. And we know even under the best of circumstances, adolescents are struggling with the effort to become adults, to become socially competent, to negotiate new roles. They're undergoing rapid psychological, social, physical changes in their lives. And being homeless really interferes with that process and that transition to adulthood from adolescence. Difficult, like I said, for those of us who came out of much more stable and secure backgrounds. The Homeless Youth Act currently helps fund it drop-in centers, street outreach, shelter, transitional and supportive housing to unaccompanied youth now age 16 to 21, and we hope to move that up to age 24. On any given night, of the 14,000 that were cited before, 4,000, some estimate even more, maybe 4,500, unaccompanied youth are homeless in Minnesota. And it's particularly poignant, of course, to be talking about that on a day like today when it's so cold. The Department of Human Services report on the Homeless Youth Act reported that over 522 youth were served through the shelter and housing services available through the Act from July through November of 2014, and 5,600 young people were served through prevention programs funded by the Act from January to September of 2014 alone. So we can afford to do this. We must afford to do this. We cannot afford to not do this. I am extremely honored to introduce Ebony Green to share her story, because this is what it's really all about. This is a young woman who has been very successful in her efforts. Ebony.
Hello everyone, my name is Ebony Green and I'm going to be sharing my success story with you. I became homeless at the age of 16 due to conflict between my mother's then abusive and controlling boyfriend and I. My mother made the decision that one of us had to leave, and unfortunately she decided that I was the one that had to leave. Also, in fear of my safety, I personally could not challenge her on the decision of putting me out. It was safer for me to be homeless than to try to persuade my mother to let me stay. Prior to receiving services, I was couch hopping between the homes of family members of friends. I couch hopped for about a year before I was accepted into a homeless youth transitional housing program through Lutheran Social Service. I was connected to the LSS RESIC program, which is a transitional housing program for homeless youth. Through the program, I was provided with my own studio unit, to which I paid 30% of my monthly income for rent, and I also received supportive case management services and supportive adult connection from RESIC staff. Once I was stable at RESIC, I no longer had to stress or worry about where I was going to lay my head at night, which was a great relief. Being that, as a 16-year-old female, I didn't always feel safe in all the temporary living arrangements, specifically due to the risk of being sexually assaulted or exploited. The stability, as well as the support that staff provided me, allowed for me to focus my attention on working towards self-sufficiency. While I was living at RESIC, I was able to successfully complete high school while working several part-time jobs. I kind of bounced around between Burger King, Target, community centers, call centers, a bunch of different jobs. After I graduated, with the support and help of staff at RESIC, I figured out my financial aid and went on to attend Howard University in Washington, D.C., where I completed my Bachelor of Science degree. Post-undergrad, I returned back to Minnesota to work as a case manager in Hennepin County, working with teen parents. Currently, I'm in the process of completing my Master's of Social Work degree, and I'm hoping to work towards a career in politics and run for office one day. My experience with homelessness and my success of overcoming homelessness has inspired me to be a part of changing and creating the policies that impact disadvantaged youth. I encourage our legislators to invest an additional $4 million in the Homeless Youth Act so more young people can have the opportunities that I have had. Thank you. And I am pleased to now introduce Pastor T.D.
Hello, my name is Catherine Teedy. I serve as the pastor at Living Waters Lutheran Church in Lino Lakes, Minnesota, which is in the far southeast corner of Anoka County, bordering on Washington and Ramsey counties. The congregation I serve partners with our ecumenical neighbors in the Centennial Ministerial Association. We work together to assist youth in need throughout Hugo, Centerville, Columbus, Lino Lakes, Lexington, Circle Pine, Shoreview, and wherever else they come from, to our church doors. Youth and families come to us from our closest 3 counties and from others, seeking aid in times of crisis. The local ministerial association has a strong relationship with the public schools, and we succeed in meeting a wide variety of emergency response needs. I'm going to tell you a success story, but one with an uncertain outcome. Last year there was a young woman who I will call Joni. She came to the attention of the Ministerial Association through the school guidance counselor. Her mother had left the family due to domestic abuse, and the children were left at the mercy of the father. His use of chemicals made him unable to care for them. One by one, the children left home until only Joni was left at home. She was afraid and decided that leaving was probably the best thing as well. So suddenly this young woman was on the streets. By the grace of God, the school guidance counselor heard her story and came to her assistance. She did not want to contact social services because she had had a negative experience with them earlier in her life, but she didn't know what to do. So the school guidance counselor called the Ministerial Association, and we rallied together to provide a sleeping bag and clothes, a winter coat, backpacks full of food, school supplies, gas cards, personal care products, and myriad other things to help her get through. The school guidance counselor asks us frequently for more shampoo and deodorant to keep in her office, and towels and hygiene products, because students like Joni come to her on a regular basis, having slept on a friend's couch or in a car or somewhere else, and they need a shower before they can go to school in the morning. So the ministerial provides the guidance counselor with those things. A local benefactor actually gave a car to Joni, which has helped her be able to get to and from school from wherever she's sleeping. She sleeps in homes in about 5 different counties right now, and she needs a car to get to work and to school. Now, Joni is a success story because she is on track to graduate on time. But the unknown is what will happen to her after graduation. She will be 18, which means that she's not eligible for many juvenile services, but as a young adult in a very vulnerable situation, she is still considered homeless. I think part of the brilliance of this act is raising the age so that students like Joni can continue or start tapping into services, which they will need for some time to come. Now, not all of the kids are as blessed as she is. Many end up flying beneath the radar of the social services system because they move between counties. Others are so transient that they're hard to find, and some disappear altogether, many to much worse situations. Congregations like ours do our best to serve homeless families and youth in our communities, but we cannot do it alone. Even partnering with other churches and tapping into the social service system, we simply cannot meet the extensive need that exists. The Homeless Youth Act is a necessary and flexible tool that leverages the critical support of congregations and caring neighbors, plus federal and private support to serve young people. Thank you to all of you for your support in moving this forward. To speak more about the situation of homeless youth in the Arrowhead region of our state, I'm happy to introduce to you Bishop Tom Aiken, who is the Bishop of the Northeastern Minnesota Synod of the ELCA. Bishop Tom.
Thank you. As a bishop who also serves outstate, I can tell you that my experience with homeless youth really started after I was ordained. So now 30 years in this vocation, I have learned just what a devastating problem it is. And because often homelessness for youth can be invisible, and it was in my early days, but it isn't anymore. I can tell you that in the 13 counties of northeastern Minnesota, I have talked with homeless youth in Onamia, in Brainerd, International Falls, and now in Duluth where I live, where 120 kids, I'm going to call them, really are homeless every single night. And in Brainerd, it was in base fishing houses. It's in International Falls. I know I talked to 2 kids that had made a little house out of discarded plywood in a lumber yard. Two of those kids I actually got to know. And it's only because other caring adults like yourselves get involved in this that we really realize the extent of the problem. I can also say that I know that in our synod and in the synods of the ELCA and all other church bodies and Minnesotans in general, we respect our state, we respect our youth, we want to put an end to this, and the $4 million ask will go a long ways toward that goal, to put an end to homeless youth. So I encourage you in this endeavor. Back to Bishop Anderson.
Well, so we're grateful to have a chance to speak on behalf of the Homeless Youth Act. I want to recognize my colleague Steve Delzer, who's here from southeastern Minnesota, and my colleague Larry Wilrabi, who's here from northwest Minnesota. Our other colleagues aren't able to continue to be with us, but they've been a part of this day because we wanted to stand together and speak in favor of this, as well as all of the other leaders that you see standing in front of you. So we know that young people are at a critical point in their lives. And we know that they need the support of caring adults to help them and guide them through this important transition to their adulthood. And we believe the Homeless Youth Act is an opportunity that will increase the odds that young people will make that transition and that they'll be able to be connected to adults, caring adults who care for them, provide housing for them so they might be safe, give them other services that increase the odds they might be successful as they transition towards a healthy, successful adulthood. We want to hear more stories like Ebony. I want to see more young adults experience success where they can step out of terrible trouble into the amazing gifts they've been given to care for this world that God has given to us. Do we have any questions? Well, not seeing any then, we'll bring our press conference to an end. Thank you very much for being with us.